Hey guys, Colleen here, and I have a really special amp to show you today. Hi, Hank. It is this 1961 6G6 Bassman. As you can see, it's housed in a black Tolex enclosure. Originally, it would have been in a blonde enclosure. But you can see the brown control panel. This amp has been heavily modified, and we'll go through all of that later. All of these controls pretty much do different things now. The amp has EL34s instead of 6L6s. And usually if an amp comes into me that's been really heavily modified, I'll give the option to bring the amp to stock. It always depends what the customer wants and what their goal is, but in this case, we are leaving it modified because this amp belonged to my client's dear friend, the late Pete Phillips. Pete was a guitar player, and an amazing guitar player at that, which you will see shortly. But he unfortunately passed away in recent years. Um, he played with the artist Matthew Sweet for quite a while, and I don't know when he would have picked up this amp, but I would like to think that it was modified to capture the sound that Pete was going for. So in this case, I think it's really special to leave the amp as is, and that's why I also wanted to showcase it. Myself and quite a few of my friends and my dad and my friends' dads all really love Matthew Sweet. You know, he was super big in the 90s, and I could blast that song Girlfriend over and over and over. I believe Pete joined Matthew Sweet's band in the late 90s, so this was after that album was recorded, but you can see Pete playing guitar on a lot of the live videos of that song, and he's playing a gold top Les Paul. We all know what a Bassman sounds like. We all know what Fender amps sound like. We all love them. And this amp totally has that Fender sound, but when all of its special features are engaged, it really gets dirty, breaks up nicely. And it's super unique. It doesn't have a master volume, so you still have to really crank it to get that intense breakup. But all of these mods make it super versatile. Let's hear Pete shredding on this amp a little bit. To say that I've been watching those videos over and over again is an understatement. It's awesome to watch and hear Pete play, and it's totally an honor to work on this amp. You can feel and hear his soul, his style, his vision for his sound radiating through this amp. So it's truly an honor and a privilege. Let's take it downstairs to the shop. I will take it apart, and then we can look at it closely together.
You know, Hank, I've got all these demos that I recorded years ago that I would love to upload, to share and stream. So I decided, why not try out DistroKid? As we know, DistroKid is a service that helps musicians upload their music to all major streaming platforms. The app is so user-friendly. You can upload album art straight from your phone, and it's really easy to input all of the track information, and then you just upload the track, and boom, you're done. Viewers of my channel get 30% off at the link I will post below. It's distrokid.com/VIP/Fazio. So go check it out, get those dusty old demos, or your fresh, sparkly new tracks. Whatever it may be, get it uploaded.
All right, so let's talk about all of the changes that were done to this circuit, because there were a lot of changes. So starting out, I can see that the rectifier tube has been converted to a solid state rectifier, and somebody put silicone in that tube socket to prevent anybody from plugging a tube in there. The 6G6 A and B both use solid state rectifiers. Now let's get into the control panel and talk about what everything does, because it's a totally different amp at this point. So we don't have anything hooked up to these inputs. So these are the main input jacks. This is the volume control, and there's also a push-pull bright switch. This is not a treble control. It is some sort of like gain balance. So this kind of shapes the tone of the overdrive that you're getting. This is a mid control with a pull to boost the mids. I think like the upper mids. Main input jacks. This is a dead knob, so there's nothing hooked up to the pot, but it is a gain boost switch. We have treble and bass, presence, with another boost. This is kind of like a bass boost. So we can see this is like a totally different amp, super unique, super versatile. Tons of EQ options, which I love. And the phase inverter circuit is pretty much the same. Instead of 6L6s, they're using EL34s. So that's why the screen resistors are now 1K resistors. At first I thought this pot on the back here would be a master volume pot, but it's actually a negative feedback control. So first of all, I noticed that these 100 ohm filament resistors are a little bit burnt. This one especially is a little charred, so I'm going to replace those, and instead of having them come off the sockets like this, I'm probably going to install them off the pilot light assembly like they are typically seen. I know I'm going to have to do a full resolder on this because you can see bad solder connection right there. I noticed a few other ones that looked a little like they needed some attention, so I'm just going to do a full resolder. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. It might need a preamp tube. I think the first time I tested this, I noticed some crackling, so I'm going to test it again with you guys, and we'll see if we hear any noise. So this amp is going to have a bit of a higher noise floor than usual just due to all of the extra stuff going on. I'm not really concerned about that, but we can hear that this is the bad solder joint that I had found. That's definitely not a great sound. I'm not hearing that much crackle. Really, the only crackle that I'm hearing is affiliated with the output tube sockets. They need a good cleaning and tightening of the pins. So other than like a deep service, I really don't think this amp is going to need too much work, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a deep service, do a complete resolder of all of the sockets, all of the components, and then we'll test it again. But I think that's really all it's going to need. Oh yeah, we should check the filter cap. All right, so we can see these caps have been changed before. None of them are really leaky or anything, and there's no hum issues, so I'm just going to leave them as is. The only thing I don't love is when like the leads are just kind of soldered onto the old leads like that. I don't love that, but I'm just going to have to leave it like that. But I'll make sure all of those connections are solid and secure. All right, let's start by cleaning and tightening the preamp sockets. And for those of you who are new here, I like to use my Deoxit D5, and then I take one of the preamp tubes and just work it in and out of the socket. And then I take my trusty little flathead
that I kind of like filed down to a point, and then I use it to get in and crimp those pins back together, tightening them up so that they hold those tube pins in there real tightly. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for all of these 4 preamp sockets. All right, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the output tube sockets. We can kind of get a closer look here at how they plugged that rectifier socket with silicone. And then I'm noticing here, there's some of this red paint, which I believe is a paint that's kind of used to reduce arcing or burning. So I wonder if at some point there was a tube failure that caused the socket to burn and they just kind of put that anti-flame paint there instead of changing the socket. But anyways, so similarly with the output sockets, I just kind of stick my little guy in there and tighten those pins together. So I'm going to do that for these 2 sockets. All right, this part of the chassis has been serviced, so I'm going to put the tubes back in and then we can go do the work on the circuit side. All right, so now time for the resolder, and this is the socket that I noticed having most of the soldering issues. So I'm just gonna start there. I don't necessarily need to show you guys my entire resolder, as it is a bit tedious, but I am gonna go ahead and solder the entire amp completely. So basically I'm just touching up the solder on all of the pins, and then I will go ahead and do like all of the components on the board as well. Literally anything that's soldered in this amp is going to get retouched. I'm going to be really thorough and make sure I get everything, and then we'll clean up all of the pots and move along from there. Alrighty, I've resoldered every point in the chassis. A lot of bad solder joints, so I'm glad that I took the time to just solder every single thing, because you never know what's going to come up. And now we're going to remove these 2 100 ohm filament resistors and solder them onto the pilot light assembly. And I'm also going to grab a little ground lug, and so this is going to be our ground point, this nut right there. Move that out of the way. Now I'm just going to cut these out here. There's 1, and here's 2. And I am glad that I changed this, because this is definitely burnt. Now I'm going to just start out by clearing some solder out of these little terminals. And that'll give us room to install the resistors. Got my replacement 100 ohm resistors. So each one goes to one side of the filament connection, and then they're both grounded on the other side. All right, so we got those reinstalled. Last thing I gotta do here service-wise is clean all the pots. So I'm just putting a little deoxit in the little opening here in the pot and then working them around. And then the ones that have switches, you kind of work the switches a little bit too. Real quick, no more crackling. In the output tube sockets, the preamp tubes are all really quiet. And another thing I like to do is gently kind of like tap around. Make sure you're not hearing any weird noises or anything, which we're not. It seems like the service really cured most of the issues, especially the resoldering. All right, we got that loosely back together, so let's hear it. All right, so that y'all can hear how versatile this amp is, I'm going to show you how it sounds with none of the boosts engaged, and then I'm going to pull out all of the boost switches so you can hear the tonal difference. And this will be at a fairly low volume, so it's not going to totally be breaking up into overdrive oblivion, but you'll still be able to hear the basic differences in the tone and the gain and all that stuff. With all the boosts out, you'll get a little more crunch and a little more fuzz and warmth. And when everything's pushed in, it's pretty Fendery still. Be doing his guitar part justice, but these are on his settings, so you'll get the gist. All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this video. I loved making it for you guys and showcasing this awesome amp and Pete's rad guitar playing. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will see you next time.